Thursday, December 18, 2025. A Kern County Superior Court courtroom in Bakersfield, California fell silent as the jury foreperson prepared to deliver a verdict that would spark outrage and heated debate across the entire nation. Maya Hernandez, just 20 years old, stood at the defense table wearing an expression that cameras captured for millions of viewers watching on court TV. The young mother from Visalia had been charged with second-degree murder, involuntary manslaughter, and 2 counts of child endangerment, charges stemming from the June 29th death of her 1-year-old son, Amillio Gutierrez. The baby died after being left in a hot car for more than 2.5 hours, while his mother was inside a medical spa getting a cosmetic procedure. Not just lip fillers, as initially reported by media outlets. A liquid Brazilian butt lift, a BBL. A procedure designed to enhance her physical appearance while her 2 children slowly cooked to death in a parking lot on a 101-degree California afternoon. Before we go further, if you're drawn to cases that expose shocking failures of justice and parental negligence that costs innocent lives, like, share, subscribe now, and hit that notification bell. This is Crime Case Voices, where we go beyond headlines into the disturbing heart of true crime. The jury had deliberated for 2 full days. They had reviewed surveillance footage showing Hernandez sitting in the spa's waiting room for hours, chatting with other customers about 4th of July plans. They had watched recorded police interrogations where she admitted knowing hot cars could kill children. They had heard testimony from nurses who described her 1-year-old arriving at the hospital without a pulse, not breathing, his tiny body pale and almost blue. Now they had reached their decision, at least on some of the charges. The courtroom held its collective breath as the verdicts were read. Count 3, child endangerment, guilty. Count 4, child endangerment, guilty. Maya Hernandez was convicted of endangering both of her children, Amillio, who died, and Mateo, who survived. But on count 1, second-degree murder, the charge that could have sent Maya Hernandez to prison for 15 years to life, the jury delivered words that would ignite a firestorm of public outrage. We are unable to reach a unanimous verdict. They were deadlocked, hopelessly split. Some jurors believed Hernandez acted with implied malice, that she consciously disregarded a known risk of death when she left her babies in that car. Others believed she was negligent, careless, criminally stupid, but not a murderer. Judge Bremer had no choice. He declared a mistrial on the second-degree murder charge. And because involuntary manslaughter is considered a lesser-included offense under California law, the hung jury on murder meant count 2, involuntary manslaughter, also resulted in a mistrial. Maya Hernandez had escaped both the murder and the manslaughter charges. All that remained were the 2 child endangerment convictions. The maximum sentence for child endangerment under California law is 6 years in prison per count. For 2 counts, Hernandez could theoretically face up to 12 years, but sentences are typically served concurrently rather than consecutively. A woman who left her baby to cook to death in a car while she got a Brazilian butt lift might serve 6 years or less. Amillio Gutierrez will be dead forever. His grandmother, Katie Martinez, had wanted justice for her grandson. She had told reporters how Amillio was strapped into his car seat, unable to escape, unable to save himself. She literally locked them in their car seats and shut their doors, Martinez said. Now she would have to process a verdict that fell far short of what many believed her grandson deserved. A status hearing was scheduled for January 12, 2026. At that hearing, prosecutors will decide whether to retry Maya Hernandez on the murder and manslaughter charges. They could pursue a second trial, hoping a different jury will reach a unanimous verdict. They could negotiate a plea deal, or they could accept the verdict and move directly to sentencing on the charges that stuck. Criminal defense attorney Jared Thompson, who has over 15 years of experience in Bakersfield courts, offered his analysis after the verdict. It's very hard for a jury to believe that she not only understood that there was a high probability of death by doing what she did, but that she did it with that state of mind. But millions of Americans watching the case unfold had a simpler question. How is leaving your children to die in a hot car while you get cosmetic surgery not murder? To understand how we got here, to understand why a jury couldn't agree on the most serious charge, we need to go back to the beginning. Back to a Sunday morning in June when Maya Hernandez loaded her 2 sons into a Toyota Corolla and drove toward a tragedy that would end one life and destroy countless others. Before we examine what happened on June 29, 2025, you need to understand the science of how quickly a parked car becomes a death trap, and why Maya Hernandez's claim that she didn't know the danger is so difficult for many to accept. More than 1,010 children have died of heat stroke after being left or trapped in hot cars over the past 25 years in the United States alone. That's not a typo. Over 1,000 children dead in hot cars since 1998. That's an average of 37 children dying this way every single year. In 2024, 39 children died in hot cars, up 35% from the 29 deaths recorded in 2023. In both 2018 and 2019, a record 53 children died this way, the highest numbers in at least a quarter century. And as of late 2025, at least 30 more children had joined that grim tally, including Amillio Gutierrez. These aren't rare, unpredictable tragedies. They're preventable deaths that happen with horrifying regularity, year after year, despite decades of public awareness campaigns, news coverage, warning labels, and pleas from every major child safety organization in the country. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration runs campaigns. Pediatricians warn parents at every well-child visit. News stations broadcast stories every summer. "Look before you lock" has become a national slogan, and still children keep dying. Here's what the science tells us about how quickly a car becomes a coffin. A car's interior temperature can rise 20 degrees Fahrenheit in just 10 minutes. That's not an exaggeration for dramatic effect. That's peer-reviewed research published in the journal Pediatrics. Meteorologist Jan Null, who has been tracking hot car deaths since 1998, found very rapid rates of rise in his studies, around 19 degrees Fahrenheit in the first 10 minutes regardless of the starting outdoor temperature or type of vehicle. 80% of a car's interior temperature rise occurs within the first 30 minutes. After that initial surge, the temperature continues climbing at a slower rate until it reaches extremely dangerous levels. Levels that no human being, let alone a small child, can survive. On a 90-degree day, the inside of a car will reach 133 degrees Fahrenheit in roughly an hour. That's hot enough to cause severe burns on contact with interior surfaces. That's hot enough to kill. But here's what many people don't realize, and what makes claims of ignorance so hard to swallow. It doesn't need to be blazing hot outside for a car to become lethal. On a mild 70-degree day, sweater weather, the kind of day when you might think leaving the windows cracked would be fine, a car's interior can reach 113 degrees in just 1 hour. Consumer Reports testing found that even when it was just 61 degrees outside, the temperature inside a closed car reached over 105 degrees in 1 hour, dangerously close to fatal levels for a child. The first hot car death of 2025 occurred on a 68-degree day. Why do cars heat up so fast? Because they operate like greenhouses. Sunlight streams through the windows, heating up interior surfaces, the dashboard, the seats, the steering wheel, the car seat plastic. Those surfaces then radiate infrared heat that can't easily escape back through the glass. The heat builds and builds with nowhere to go, turning the vehicle into an oven. And the common-sense solutions people think will help? They don't. Rolling down the windows doesn't work. Cracking them open allows some heat to escape, but as long as the sun continues beating down on the interior surfaces, temperatures remain dangerously high. Studies show minimal difference between windows up and windows cracked. Parking in the shade doesn't work either. Yes, a shaded car will be slightly cooler than one in direct sunlight, but slightly cooler still means deadly. The greenhouse effect continues regardless of shade, and children are devastatingly, horrifyingly vulnerable to this heat in ways that adults are not. A young child's body temperature rises 3 to 5 times faster than an adult's. That's partly because children don't sweat as effectively as adults. Perspiration doesn't become the body's primary cooling mechanism until puberty. Their underdeveloped thermoregulatory systems simply cannot dissipate heat fast enough to keep up with what's being absorbed. Children strapped into car seats are even more vulnerable. They cannot remove clothing to cool down. They cannot open the door. They cannot unbuckle themselves from the 5-point harness holding them in place. They cannot roll down the windows. They cannot call for help. They can only sit there, trapped, as their body temperature climbs degree by degree toward death. Heat stroke begins when core body temperature reaches approximately 104 degrees Fahrenheit. At this point, the body's thermoregulatory system becomes overwhelmed. Toxins flood the body. Cell death begins. The child may begin vomiting, become confused, or lose consciousness. At 106 degrees, the body begins to convulse. Exactly what Maya Hernandez described seeing when she found Amillio seizing in his car seat. At 107 degrees, death is imminent. This was Amillio's body temperature when he arrived at the hospital, 107.2 degrees. The emergency room nurse who treated him testified it was the highest body temperature she had ever seen in her career. At 108 degrees, irreversible brain damage occurs. Cardiac arrhythmias develop. Multiple organ systems fail. If the child isn't already dead, they soon will be. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration breaks down how these deaths happen. 52% of the time, a parent or caregiver forgot a child was in the car. They simply didn't remember the child was there. 32% of the time, a child climbed into an unlocked vehicle on their own and couldn't get out. And 12% of the time, the category that applies to Maya Hernandez, a child was knowingly left in the vehicle by an adult who didn't understand or didn't care about the danger. Maya Hernandez knew her children were in that car. She made a deliberate choice to leave them there. She made a deliberate choice not to bring them inside, even though she was explicitly told she could via text message that morning. And during her police interrogation, she admitted something that should have destroyed her defense entirely. I've seen things in the news and from people in general about the dangers of leaving children alone in the car. She knew. Maya Hernandez knew hot cars could kill children. She acknowledged being aware of the danger before June 29, 2025. And she left her babies in that car anyway. As we go further into this case, like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. June 29, 2025, a Sunday. The temperature in California's Central Valley was climbing toward triple digits, as it often does in late June. Weather stations recorded highs between 99 and 101 degrees Fahrenheit in the Bakersfield area. The kind of oppressive summer heat that makes asphalt shimmer, turns steering wheels into branding irons, and transforms parked cars into death chambers within minutes. Maya Hernandez had an appointment she apparently couldn't miss and couldn't reschedule. The 20-year-old single mother from Visalia had scheduled a cosmetic procedure at Always Beautiful Med Spa on South Real Road in Bakersfield. Initially reported by media as lip filler injections, testimony at trial revealed the truth. Hernandez was there for a liquid Brazilian butt lift, a more extensive cosmetic enhancement procedure. That morning, Hernandez woke up and prepared her two sons for the 110-mile drive south. 1-year-old Amillio Gutierrez and his 2-year-old brother Mateo ate breakfast together, fruit cups and bananas. According to Hernandez's later testimony at trial, both boys had been born full-term without medical complications. Both were healthy. Mateo had breastfed for 7 to 8 months before Hernandez returned to work. Amillio had breastfed for about 4 months. They were typical toddlers with their whole lives ahead of them. Hernandez strapped them into their car seats in her 2022 Toyota Corolla Hybrid, Amillio in one, Mateo in the other, and headed south on Highway 99 toward Bakersfield. Here's the detailed timeline, reconstructed from surveillance footage, text messages, cell phone records, and witness testimony presented at trial. That morning, Maya Hernandez texted the registered nurse at Always Beautiful Med Spa to confirm her appointment. During that exchange, she asked a critical question. "Thank you, can I bring my kids by chance?" The nurse's response was clear, welcoming, and explicit. "Sure, if you don't mind them waiting in the waiting room, hun." Hernandez never responded to that text. She read the message. She knew she had permission to bring her children inside the air-conditioned spa, where staff could help watch them, where other customers had brought their own children, where they would be safe. She chose not to take that option. Approximately 12 p.m., Hernandez left Visalia with both children for the roughly 2-hour drive to Bakersfield. Approximately 1 p.m., Hernandez arrived at Always Beautiful Med Spa on South Real Road in Bakersfield. According to Detective Dean Barthelmez, surveillance footage showed her arriving just before 1 p.m. 1 to 1:30 p.m., Hernandez remained in her car with the children, waiting. She later told detectives she sat in the vehicle until about 1:30 p.m., briefly went inside to check on her appointment status, then returned to the car because the spa was busy and running behind schedule. 1:10 p.m. Hernandez texted the nurse, who responded that she was backed up and asked Hernandez to wait. 2:02 p.m. The nurse texted Hernandez that she was ready. Come inside. 2:09 p.m. This is the moment captured on surveillance footage that would become central to the prosecution's case. Maya Hernandez exited her 2022 Toyota Corolla hybrid for the final time. She left the engine running. She left the air conditioning set to 60 degrees with the fan on level 4 out of 7. She left her keys hidden under the seat. She also left her 1-year-old and 2-year-old sons strapped into their car seats in the back of that vehicle. According to her later statements, she left them with crackers, candy, milk, and water. She propped her cell phone up against the back of a seat so Mateo could watch cartoons. She believed they would be fine. 2:09 p.m. marks the last moment Amillio and Amillio Gutierrez had air conditioning. 2:27 p.m. Hernandez texted the nurse that she had arrived inside the spa and was ready for her procedure. 2:09 p.m. to 3:10 p.m. During this hour, the car's air conditioning continued running, keeping interior temperatures in the low 80s, around 80.6 degrees at the coolest point, according to police recreation. The children were uncomfortable but not in immediate danger. Approximately 3:05 to 3:10 p.m., the 2022 Toyota Corolla Hybrid's automatic safety feature activated. After approximately 1 hour of inactivity while the shift lever was in park, the engine shut off automatically. This is a documented feature in the owner's manual, designed to prevent battery drain and reduce emissions. The air conditioning stopped. The temperature inside that car began its deadly climb. 3:15 p.m. According to police recreation conducted under similar conditions, interior temperature had already reached 92 degrees, a jump of approximately 12 degrees in just 5 minutes after the AC shut off. 3:30 p.m. Temperature continuing to climb. The children were now trapped in dangerous heat with no cooling, no escape, and no way to call for help. 4 p.m. By this point, according to the police recreation, interior temperatures had climbed past 100 degrees and were still rising. The children had been without air conditioning for nearly an hour. 2:09 p.m. to 4:33 p.m. 2 hours and 24 minutes. Maya Hernandez was inside Always Beautiful Med Spa. The actual BBL procedure took only about 15 to 20 minutes, according to testimony from registered nurse Harmony Pacheco. But the wait time was extremely long because the spa was very busy that day. During those 2 hours and 24 minutes, surveillance footage captured Maya Hernandez sitting in the waiting room, talking to other customers, chatting about 4th of July plans with strangers, checking her Apple Watch. How many times did she check that watch? Prosecutors revealed the answer at trial, 45 times. Maya Hernandez checked her Apple Watch 45 times while her children were in that car. 45 times she looked at her wrist and saw how much time was passing. 45 times she had the opportunity to think, I should check on my kids. And 45 times she chose not to walk outside. 4:33 p.m. Maya Hernandez finally left the spa and walked back to her vehicle. What she found when she opened that car door would be described in devastating detail by witnesses, investigators, and medical professionals over the course of her murder trial. At 4:33 p.m. on June 29, 2025, 2 hours and 24 minutes after she left them, Maya Hernandez finally walked back to her car in the parking lot of Always Beautiful Med Spa. The BBL procedure was complete. Payment needed to be finalized. She had left her phone in the car with the children so Mateo could watch cartoons, and she needed it to pay. It was time to retrieve her belongings and make the 110-mile drive back to Visalia. What she found when she opened that car door would haunt everyone who heard the details at trial. According to Hernandez's own statements to police, both children appeared red-cheeked when she first looked at them through the window. She told detectives she wasn't immediately alarmed by Amillio's appearance. She said he gets red easily. It was a hot day. The AC must have been struggling. Nothing to panic about. Then 1-year-old Amillio began seizing. His tiny body started convulsing uncontrollably in the car seat. He was shaking. Foam was coming from his mouth, white foam bubbling from his lips and nose. His eyes were rolling back in his head. His skin wasn't just red anymore. According to testimony from registered nurse Harmony Pacheco, who would see him moments later, Amillio was purple. Purple, the color of oxygen deprivation, the color of a body shutting down, the color of death. 2-year-old Mateo was lethargic in his car seat, his hair soaking wet with sweat. His more developed thermoregulatory system had been fighting desperately to cool him down through perspiration, something his younger brother's body couldn't do effectively. Mateo was alive, but barely responsive. He had survived only because children over age 2 have developed sweat glands. His baby brother did not have that biological advantage. According to police recreation, the interior temperature of that Toyota Corolla had reached approximately 116 degrees Fahrenheit by 4:33 p.m. The children had been trapped in that heat, without air conditioning, for approximately 1 hour and 23 minutes. Hernandez told police she initially pointed the air conditioning vents toward Amillio, trying to cool him down, but the car had shut off. There was no cool air, just heat everywhere. She grabbed Amillio from his car seat and ran back into the spa. Registered nurse Harmony Pacheco, who had performed Hernandez's BBL procedure, testified about what happened next. Hernandez burst through the treatment room door, standing in the doorway with her baby in her arms. "My baby," Hernandez said. Just those 2 words. Pacheco looked at the child. What she saw was horrifying. He was purple, he had foam in his mouth, but I didn't get such a great look at the child, Pacheco testified. I shouted for someone to call the ambulance, and then she went back outside. Pacheco had known Hernandez had children somewhere, but she had no idea they had been sitting in a car in the parking lot for over 2 hours. Hernandez had never mentioned it. Not once during the long wait. Not during the procedure. Not during any of the casual conversations she'd had with other customers about holiday plans. She had acted like any other customer without a care in the world. Isabel Carrion, another spa employee, provided additional testimony about those chaotic moments. According to Carrion, Hernandez had initially left the building to retrieve her phone to pay for the procedure. When Hernandez didn't return for 15 minutes, Carrion went outside, partly to get a charger from her own car, partly to check if Hernandez had left without paying. What Carrion found was Hernandez sitting in the driver's seat of her Toyota, holding a dying baby in her arms. She was sitting in the driver's seat, Carrion testified. The girl had the baby in her arms. Carrion told Hernandez to bring the child inside immediately so the registered nurse could provide first aid. Hernandez complied. She did go inside when told. But Carrion noticed something else. She wasn't crying or screaming for help, Carrion testified. She wasn't acting with any urgency. Prosecutor Stephanie Tacconi asked Carrion directly. At any point, was Hernandez seen on the phone with 911, performing CPR, or initiating any life-saving measures? Carrion's answer, no. 15 minutes after discovering her children in distress. 15 minutes of what should have been frantic emergency response. Maya Hernandez apparently still hadn't called 911. She hadn't started CPR. She wasn't screaming for help. She was sitting in her car holding her purple, foaming, seizing baby. That testimony directly contradicted Hernandez's later claims that she immediately called 911 and performed CPR while dispatchers guided her. Meanwhile, another customer rushed to the Toyota and grabbed 2-year-old Mateo from the back seat. They carried the lethargic, sweaty toddler into the spa's bathroom and poured cold water on his face, desperately trying to cool him down. Someone finally called 911. Bakersfield Fire and EMS arrived at the scene at 4:45 p.m., 12 minutes after Hernandez discovered the children, and approximately 30 minutes after Amillio would have been found if she had checked on them earlier. When paramedics reached the 1-year-old, they immediately began advanced life-saving measures. Amillio was intubated at the scene, a tube inserted down his throat to help him breathe because he couldn't do it on his own. He had no pulse. He was not breathing. His tiny body was shutting down from catastrophic heat damage. Both children were rushed by ambulance to Adventist Health Hospital in Bakersfield. A registered nurse at the emergency department testified about Amillio's condition when he arrived. The baby was intubated without a pulse, not breathing. His skin appeared pale and almost blue. The purple color witnesses had described was fading as blood stopped circulating. The nurse took Amillio's temperature during the chaos of the resuscitation attempt. 107.2 degrees Fahrenheit. In her entire career working emergency medicine, the nurse testified she had never seen a body temperature that high in a child. It was the worst case she had ever encountered. Hospital staff worked on Amillio for 40 minutes. Doctors and nurses performed CPR. They administered medications. They did everything medically possible to save this 1-year-old baby whose tiny body had been destroyed by heat. At 5:48 p.m. on June 29, 2025, 1-year-old Amillio Gutierrez was pronounced dead. The official cause of death, hyperthermia, heat stroke. 2-year-old Mateo survived. His body temperature was 99 degrees when tested at the hospital, elevated but not fatal. Doctors noted that his ability to sweat had saved his life. His baby brother, at just 1 year old, had not yet developed that capability. Mateo was placed in Child Protective Services custody. He had survived, but at what cost? He had lost his brother. He had lost his mother to incarceration. He had lost his father, who was already in prison. He had lost everyone. The forensic pathologist who examined Amillio's body testified at trial. The official manner of death, he concluded, was accident. I chose accident because there was no intent to harm the child, the pathologist explained. But prosecutor Stephanie Tacconi had a different interpretation. In her closing argument, she would tell the jury, the defendant purposely, willfully, and intentionally left her children in the car, and she did so knowing what would happen. Intent to harm and conscious disregard for consequences. That was the distinction the jury would have to navigate. Hours after her 1-year-old son was pronounced dead at Adventist Health Hospital, Maya Hernandez sat in a Bakersfield police interrogation room. She was wrapped in a gray blanket, visibly exhausted, her world having collapsed around her in the span of an afternoon. Detective Kyle McNabb of the Bakersfield Police Department's Special Victims Unit sat across from her. The interview was recorded, standard procedure in homicide investigations, and that recording would later be played in full for the jury at her murder trial. What those recordings revealed was a woman who claimed ignorance about dangers she acknowledged knowing, who made statements that directly contradicted video evidence, and who seemed as focused on defending her choices as processing what she had done. The first interview was conducted before Hernandez was formally arrested. McNabb read her rights, reminded her she wasn't under arrest, and asked her to walk through what happened. Her demeanor, according to courtroom observers who watched the footage, was subdued, quiet, not openly crying despite having just learned her son was fighting for his life, and then, during the interview itself, learning he had died. Hernandez told detectives her version of events. She had driven from Visalia to Bakersfield for a cosmetic procedure, what she initially described as lip fillers but would later be revealed as a liquid BBL. She left the children in the car with the air conditioning running, set to 60 degrees. She left them with snacks, crackers, candy, milk, water. She propped her phone up so Mateo could watch cartoons. She believed they would be fine. I was certain that my car would stay on with the air conditioning running the whole time I was gone, Hernandez told McNabb. She claimed she had been in her car for extended periods before, had even slept in it, and the engine never shut off. McNabb asked the obvious follow-up. Had she ever read her owner's manual? Did she know about the automatic shut-off feature? What Hernandez apparently never did was verify her assumption. The 2022 Toyota Corolla hybrid owner's manual clearly states the vehicle will automatically shut off after approximately 1 hour when left running in park. This isn't hidden in fine print. It's a documented safety feature. She drove that car every day and never learned this basic fact about how it operated. McNabb asked why she didn't bring the children inside the spa. She had been offered that option via text message that very morning. Sure, if you don't mind them waiting in the waiting room, hun, the nurse had written. Hernandez's answer was telling. She didn't want to leave them in the waiting area while her procedure was taking place. She was concerned about them sitting in the lobby without her direct supervision. Think about that logic for a moment. She was too concerned about her children sitting in a climate-controlled waiting room with spa staff nearby to leave them there. So instead, she left them completely alone in a car in a parking lot in 101-degree heat for over 2 hours. McNabb also asked why she didn't arrange childcare. Hernandez explained that her sister, one of the only people available to watch the boys, was easily irritated. Babysitting wasn't a convenient option. So she took 2 toddlers on a 220-mile round trip for a cosmetic procedure and left them in a car. Throughout the interview, Hernandez insisted the car felt comfortably cool when she left. She explained that because it was a hybrid, the engine wouldn't make obvious running sounds to people walking by. That's why witnesses might have thought it was off. But witnesses told investigators the opposite. Multiple people who walked past the Toyota that afternoon told police they did not believe the vehicle was running. The air conditioning wasn't blowing. The car wasn't making any noise. It looked like a parked, turned-off vehicle. Then came the revelation that would become central to the prosecution's case at trial. McNabb asked Hernandez about her background. She told him she was a certified nursing assistant, a CNA. She had completed medical training. She worked in patient care in Visalia and was the primary financial provider for her family while the boy's father was incarcerated. And then McNabb asked if she knew about the dangers of leaving children in hot cars. I've seen things in the news and from people in general about the dangers of leaving children alone in the car, Hernandez admitted. She knew. Maya Hernandez knew hot cars could kill children. She acknowledged awareness of the risk, awareness that came from news coverage, from general knowledge, from being a living human being in a country where hot car deaths make headlines every single summer. And she left her babies in that car anyway. Later in the interview, Hernandez admitted something else that prosecutors would highlight. She knew it was stupid to leave the kids in the car. Her own word, stupid. McNabb confronted her with inconsistencies in her story. She had claimed her Apple Watch died, which was why she didn't know how long she'd been inside the spa. But surveillance footage clearly showed her checking that watch repeatedly throughout the afternoon. 45 times, prosecutors would later reveal. She had lied. She had lied about something investigators could easily verify. Hernandez repeatedly gave inconsistent statements. McNabb testified at trial, including the claim about her watch dying. Near the end of the first interview, McNabb delivered the news that Hernandez may have already suspected but perhaps hadn't allowed herself to fully absorb. Amillio was dead. At those words, Hernandez began sobbing. According to courtroom observers, her grandfather, who had come to support her at trial, cried in the gallery as he watched the video of her reaction. "He's dead," Hernandez asked, her voice breaking. She hung her head. She asked about Mateo. Was her other son okay? She asked if her sister could be with him. And then she said something that prosecutors would reference throughout the trial. "This is not me. This is not me." For words that seemed to capture a defendant trying to distance herself from the consequences of her own choices. As if the woman who left her children in a car for 2.5 hours was some other person. As if she could separate herself from what she had done. A second recorded interview was conducted after Hernandez was formally placed under arrest. The jury watched that footage too, seeing a woman now facing the full weight of the criminal justice system. In that second interview, Detective McNabb pressed harder on the inconsistencies, on the lies, on the choices. "I didn't leave him in there to die," Hernandez said at one point, a statement that would become a central point of dispute at trial. McNabb's response was measured. "I don't think it was intentional." Intentional. That word, that concept, would define everything that followed. Maya Hernandez didn't intend to kill her son. No reasonable person believes she wanted him dead. But did she act with implied malice? Did she consciously disregard a known risk of death? The prosecution would argue yes. The defense would argue no. And the jury would be unable to agree. While Maya Hernandez sat in a Kern County jail cell on $1 million bail awaiting trial, a family in Porterville was trying to process an unimaginable loss and plan a funeral that should never have been necessary. Katie Martinez is Amillio Gutierrez's paternal grandmother. She's the mother of the boy's father, a man who was incarcerated at the time of the tragedy for an alleged domestic violence incident. She's also, technically, Maya Hernandez's mother-in-law, though whatever relationship existed between them before June 29, 2025, was destroyed forever the moment her grandson died in that parking lot. Katie Martinez found out about Amillio's death in one of the worst possible ways. Her son called her from jail. Picture that moment. A phone ringing. A collect call from a correctional facility. A son's voice, broken with grief, delivering news that no parent should ever have to hear secondhand. From behind bars, unable to comfort his own mother or be comforted himself. His baby was dead. His 1-year-old son had been left in a hot car by the boy's own mother while she got cosmetic work done. And he was locked in a cell, unable to do anything but absorb the horror from 100 miles away. In the days following the tragedy, Katie Martinez spoke to multiple reporters. Her words cut through all the legal arguments and defense strategies, all the discussions of implied malice and conscious disregard, straight to the horrifying reality of what happened to those children. They were strapped in their car seats, Martinez said, her voice heavy with grief. They couldn't even get up to save themselves. She literally locked them in their car seats and shut their doors. That image, 2 babies, buckled into 5-point harnesses, unable to unbuckle themselves, unable to open the doors, unable to escape, unable to do anything but sit there as the temperature climbed and climbed, haunted everyone who heard Martinez speak. Amillio couldn't cry loud enough for anyone to hear him through closed windows. He couldn't bang on the glass hard enough to attract attention. He couldn't reach the door handles even if he'd known what they were for. He was completely, utterly helpless. He was 1 year old. Amillio was so special, Martinez said through tears during one interview. He always had a smile no matter what. He is loved by so many. Our lives will not be the same. Then she shared a detail that transformed the tragedy from devastating to almost unbearable. He just started walking on Thursday, and on Sunday, he gained his angel wings. 3 days. Amillio Gutierrez took his first independent steps on Thursday, June 26, 2025. It's one of the most celebrated milestones in any child's life. Those wobbly first steps that parents record on their phones, that grandparents brag about to anyone who will listen, that mark the transition from baby to toddler. By Sunday, June 29th, he was dead. He never got to run. Never got to chase his brother around a backyard. Never got to toddle toward his grandmother's open arms. 3 days after learning to walk, he died strapped immobile in a car seat, unable to move at all. On the GoFundMe page Martinez set up to help with funeral expenses, she wrote a message directly to her grandson. "Your dad loves you so much. You did not deserve this." No, he didn't deserve it. No child deserves to die because their parent prioritized a cosmetic procedure over basic safety. The family held a vigil for Amillio at a local park in Porterville on Saturday, July 5, 2025, the day after the 4th of July that Maya Hernandez had been chatting about with strangers in the spa waiting room while her son was dying. Instead of fireworks and barbecues and celebration, Amillio's family gathered to mourn a baby who would never see another holiday. Martinez and the extended family began distributing purple ribbons in Amillio's memory. The same purple color witnesses described seeing on his face when Hernandez finally found him. "We're promoting the purple ribbon so that people see the ribbon and know, hey, check your car. Make sure your kids aren't in your car. Save a kid's life," Martinez explained. Even in the depths of their grief, the Gutierrez family was trying to prevent another family from experiencing what they were going through. They couldn't bring Amillio back, but maybe they could save someone else's child. Meanwhile, 2-year-old Mateo, the brother who survived, had been placed in Child Protective Services custody immediately after the incident. He was alive but traumatized beyond measure, separated from everyone who loved him, placed with strangers by the state of California. The family fought desperately to get him back. Moses and Patricia Sandoval, Mateo's aunt and uncle, are licensed foster parents. They had been formally approved by the state of California to care for children. They tried to take custody of their traumatized nephew, to bring him home to family who loved him, who could help him process the loss of his brother, who could provide stability in the midst of unimaginable chaos. Kern County denied their request. "We can't fathom what he's going through," the Sandovals said in an interview. "I don't know even if he comprehends the situation he's in." At 2 years old, Mateo had lost his baby brother, his playmate, his companion, the person he'd shared every day of his young life with. He had lost his mother, who was incarcerated awaiting trial for killing his brother. He had lost his father, who was already in prison for domestic violence. And then the state took him away from the grandparents, aunts, uncles, and great-grandparents who desperately wanted to give him a loving home. Rosendo Gutierrez, Mateo's paternal grandfather, demanded answers from the system that had taken his surviving grandson. If family has stepped up, why hasn't he been released? Nadine Iniego, the boy's great-grandmother, expressed the family's pain with heartbreaking simplicity. "It hurts. I just want Mateo to come home and the baby put to rest." The family eventually raised enough money to transport Amillio's body from Bakersfield back to Porterville, where he could be buried near the people who loved him. A local business owner named Scotty Hubbard, who runs Scotty's Country Time Lemon Shakers, organized a fundraiser to help with expenses. "Scotty contacted me at home," Martinez explained. "He said, 'I would like to do something for you. I have a small business, and all the proceeds will go to your family and to the funeral home. Any expenses that you have.'" Strangers stepping up because a grandmother couldn't afford to bury her grandson. "It's been tough," Katie Martinez said in one of her final interviews before the trial. "I mean, to say we're holding it up is to say the least because we're not holding it up. It's been really hard. A 1-year-old is dead. A 2-year-old is in state custody. A father sits in prison, grieving a son he'll never hold again. Grandparents and great-grandparents plan funerals instead of birthday parties. An entire extended family destroyed because a 20-year-old woman wanted a Brazilian butt lift and couldn't be bothered to bring her children inside." As we go on into this case, like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. The murder trial of Maya Hernandez began on Monday, December 8, 2025, more than 5 months after Amillio Gutierrez's death. It was held in Kern County Superior Court in Bakersfield, the same city where the baby had died on that June afternoon. The trial would last just over a week. It would feature testimony from police detectives, spa employees, medical professionals, forensic experts, and ultimately Maya Hernandez herself. It would be broadcast on court TV, allowing millions of Americans to watch the proceedings and form their own opinions about whether justice was being served. Deputy District Attorney Stephanie Taccone led the prosecution. From her opening statement, she made clear that this was not a case about a tragic accident. This was about deliberate choices made by a mother who put her own vanity above her children's lives. "This isn't a case of a forgotten child whose mom was in a hurry," Taccone told the jury of 12. "These were intentional actions done willfully by the defendant." Taccone acknowledged what the defense would argue, that Hernandez didn't intend for her son to die, that she believed the children would be safe, that she made a terrible mistake. But Taccone pushed back against that framing. "She chose to ignore all of her responsibilities," the prosecutor argued. "Maya Hernandez chose her own vanity over her children, so she could work on her looks." The prosecution's case was built on overwhelming evidence that Taccone presented methodically over several days of testimony. The text messages. Jurors saw the text exchange from the morning of June 29th, where Hernandez asked if she could bring her children and the nurse explicitly said yes. "Sure, if you don't mind them waiting in the waiting room, hun." Hernandez never responded. She chose to leave her children in the car instead of in an air-conditioned waiting room with spa staff nearby. The stroller in the trunk. Detectives photographed a functional baby stroller in the back of Hernandez's Toyota Corolla. Detective Nathan Poteet testified that the stroller appeared to be in working condition. Hernandez could have wheeled both children into the spa. She chose not to use it. The surveillance footage. The jury watched the entire 2 hours of Maya Hernandez sitting in the waiting room of Always Beautiful Med Spa. They saw her chatting with other customers, some of whom had brought their own children inside. They saw her checking her Apple Watch repeatedly. They saw her never once walk the short distance to the parking lot to check on her babies. Prosecutors revealed that Hernandez checked her Apple Watch 45 times during those 2+ hours. 45 opportunities to notice how much time was passing. 45 moments when she could have thought about her children alone in that car. And 45 times she chose to stay inside. The contradictory statements. Detective Kyle McNabb testified about Hernandez's police interviews, highlighting the inconsistencies. She claimed her watch had died, but surveillance proved she checked it repeatedly. She claimed she didn't know how long she'd been inside, but she had access to the time the entire afternoon. The BBL revelation, in what local media described as a dramatic courtroom revelation, spa employee testimony confirmed that Hernandez wasn't there for a quick lip filler injection. She was there for a liquid Brazilian butt lift, a more extensive cosmetic enhancement procedure. The knowledge of danger. Most devastating to the defense was Hernandez's own admission from her police interview. I've seen things in the news and from people in general about the dangers of leaving children alone in the car. She knew. A certified nursing assistant with medical training knew that hot cars could kill children. And she left her babies in one anyway. Taccone also called witnesses who painted a disturbing picture of Hernandez's behavior after discovering the children. Isabel Carrion, the spa employee who found Hernandez sitting in her car 15 minutes after she first discovered the children, testified that Hernandez wasn't crying or screaming for help and wasn't acting with any urgency. Taccone asked Carrion directly, "At any point, was Hernandez seen on the phone with 911, performing CPR, or initiating any life-saving measures?" The answer was no. The police recreation. Detective Dean Barthelmez testified about a recreation Bakersfield police conducted using Hernandez's actual vehicle. They drove the Toyota back to the same parking spot, placed thermometers and body cameras inside, and measured how temperatures changed. The results were damning. With the AC running, interior temperature stayed around 80 to 81 degrees. After the car shut off automatically at the 1-hour mark, temperature rose by approximately 20 degrees within 15 minutes. By the time matching 4:33 p.m., when Hernandez returned to her vehicle, interior temperature had reached 116 degrees Fahrenheit. The defense questioned whether the recreation was valid, arguing that the presence of an adult and 2 children could have altered the results since people absorb heat. But Barthelmez explained that no outside experts were consulted due to time constraints, and the recreation was conducted in conditions most favorable to the defendant. The medical testimony, nurses from Adventist Health described Amillio's condition when he arrived at the emergency room. A registered nurse testified that the 1-year-old was intubated, without a pulse, not breathing. His skin appeared pale and almost blue. His body temperature was 107.2 degrees, the highest she had ever seen in a child in her entire career. And she did so knowing what would happen, Taccone told the jury in her closing argument. The prosecution identified multiple points where Hernandez could have prevented her son's death, multiple off-ramps she could have taken, multiple chances to save Amillio's life that she didn't take. Now it was up to the defense to convince at least one juror that bad choices weren't the same as murder. Assistant Public Defender Terrell Wakeman faced an almost impossible task. The facts were brutal and largely undisputed. A baby was dead. Surveillance video showed the mother sitting in a spa for hours while he died outside. Police recordings captured her admitting she knew hot cars were dangerous. Public outrage was intense and universal. But Wakeman's job wasn't to argue that Maya Hernandez was innocent of all wrongdoing. Everyone knew she had left her children in that car. Her job was to argue that her client wasn't guilty of murder, that there was a meaningful legal and moral distinction between criminal negligence and second-degree murder. From the beginning of the trial, Wakeman made a strategic decision: concede the lesser charges, fight the murder charge with everything available. Her conduct was criminally negligent, Wakeman acknowledged to the jury openly, but there is no implied malice in this case, and this is definitely not second-degree murder. It was a risky strategy. By conceding to involuntary manslaughter and child endangerment, the defense was essentially admitting their client had committed serious crimes that could result in years in prison. But the alternative, fighting every charge and losing, could mean 15 years to life for second-degree murder. The key legal question, Wakeman argued repeatedly, centered on the concept of implied malice under California law. Second-degree murder requires proof that the defendant acted with conscious disregard for human life, that they knew their actions posed a high probability of death and did them anyway. The prosecution would have to prove that Maya knew that the car would time out, Wakeman told the jury. Without that specific knowledge, without proof that Hernandez knew the air conditioning would stop, there could be no conscious disregard for the risk. Without conscious disregard, there could be no murder conviction. Wakeman urged jurors throughout the trial to separate their emotional reactions from the legal facts they needed to consider. What do we call parents who don't check on their kids? Wakeman asked rhetorically during closing arguments. We call them negligent, and in this case, criminally negligent. Then came the defense's key argument. Maya taking accountability doesn't equal conscious disregard. Hernandez had admitted wrongdoing. She had acknowledged that what she did was dangerous and stupid. She wasn't denying responsibility. But admitting you made a terrible mistake is different from admitting you consciously disregarded a known risk of death. The defense called Maya Hernandez to testify in her own defense, a high-risk strategy that put her directly in the crosshairs of prosecution cross-examination, but one that allowed the jury to see her as a human being rather than a monster. Hernandez testified for several hours, describing her life as a struggling single mother. She worked as a certified nursing assistant in Visalia, trying to support 2 young children on her own. The boy's father was incarcerated for an alleged domestic violence incident. She was the sole provider, the sole caregiver, the only parent those children had on a daily basis. She described the boys in human terms, details designed to show the jury she loved her children. Both had been born full-term without medical complications. Mateo had breastfed for 7 to 8 months before she returned to work. Amillio had breastfed for about 4 months. She had fed them breakfast that morning, fruit cups and bananas, before making the drive to Bakersfield. Critically, Hernandez testified that she did not think the BBL procedure would take 2 hours. She believed it would only take about 20 minutes, similar to a standard lip filler appointment. She didn't anticipate the long wait time, the busy day at the spa, the extended time away from her vehicle. Hernandez went into the business around 2 p.m. for what she thought was a 15-minute medical procedure, the defense emphasized. She left her kids in their car seats with cookies, a bottle of milk each, and with Mateo, she left her phone so that he could watch TV. Before she went into the business, Ms. Hernandez left her keys under the seat. The car was running. The air conditioning was on. Hernandez testified that she did not know the car could shut off while parked. It wasn't until after the incident that I began to fully understand the consequences of my decisions, she told the jury. The defense also played Hernandez's 911 call, the recording of her speaking frantically with dispatchers after discovering Amillio in distress. That call was frantic. Listen to her voice in that call, Wakeman urged the jury. This wasn't a woman who didn't care about her children. This was a mother in panic, in terror, watching her baby die and not knowing what to do. Wakeman pointed to photographs showing Hernandez with her sons. Images of a mother displaying affection, holding her children, appearing to love them. Evidence that this was not a woman with implied malice in her heart. The defense also noted that Hernandez attempted to ride in the ambulance with Amillio but wasn't allowed. She wanted to be with her dying son. She wasn't indifferent to his fate. But prosecutor Stephanie Taccone pushed back hard during cross-examination. She confronted Hernandez with the text messages showing she'd been offered the chance to bring her children inside. Why didn't she respond? Why didn't she take the offer? She asked about the stroller in the trunk. Why not use it? She asked about the 45 times Hernandez checked her Apple Watch without ever stepping outside to check on her children. Taccone raised other risks Hernandez could have considered. The car could have been stolen with the children inside and the keys hidden under the seat. The children could have choked on the keys. Any number of emergencies could have occurred while she was inside. You didn't think of any of those things, Taccone said, her voice sharp with accusation. Hernandez admitted she hadn't considered all the risks. She hadn't thought through all the ways her decision could go wrong. Taccone countered the defense's emotional arguments with legal precision. It's okay that you saw those photographs of the defendant showing affection and loving Amillio, she told the jury. You can love someone and still commit murder. After closing arguments, the case went to the jury on Wednesday, December 17, 2025. They would deliberate for 2 days, unable to agree on whether Maya Hernandez was a murderer or merely criminally negligent. On Wednesday afternoon, December 17, 2025, the jury in the Maya Hernandez murder trial began their deliberations. 12 citizens of Kern County, tasked with answering a question that had divided the nation. Was leaving your children to die in a hot car while you got a BBL murder, or was it merely criminal negligence? They deliberated for the rest of Wednesday without reaching a verdict. On Thursday morning, December 18, 2025, they returned to the deliberation room. At some point that morning, they sent a note to Judge Bremer. They had reached decisions on some counts, but they were hopelessly deadlocked on others. The judge brought them back into the courtroom. The gallery fell silent as the verdicts were read. Count 3, child endangerment. Regarding Amillio, guilty. Count 4, child endangerment. Regarding Mateo, guilty. Maya Hernandez had been convicted of endangering both of her children, the one who died and the one who barely survived. But on count 1, second-degree murder, the charge that could have meant 15 years to life in prison, the foreperson delivered the words that would echo across social media and news coverage for days. We are unable to reach a unanimous verdict. They were deadlocked. The 12 jurors could not agree. Some believed Hernandez had acted with implied malice, with conscious disregard for human life. Others believed she had made a catastrophic mistake driven by negligence rather than malice. Judge Bremer declared a mistrial on the second-degree murder charge. Because involuntary manslaughter is considered a lesser included offense of murder under California law, the hung jury on count 1 automatically triggered a mistrial on count 2 as well. The jury never got to vote separately on manslaughter. They couldn't because of how the charges were structured. Maya Hernandez had escaped both the murder and the manslaughter charges. Criminal defense attorney Jared Thompson, who had followed the trial and had over 15 years of experience in Bakersfield courts, explained the legal complexities to local media after the verdict. It's very hard for a jury to believe that she not only understood that there was a high probability of death by doing what she did, but that she did it with that state of mind, Thompson said. It doesn't surprise me that a jury would struggle with a murder count in a case like that because what it sounds like, at best, is negligence. And negligence, 1, is not always criminal. And 2, if it is criminal, it's usually a much less serious type of charge than a murder count. Thompson noted that hung juries often lead to negotiations. Sometimes after a hung jury, there might be more willingness to negotiate by the prosecution. Sometimes they'll consider reevaluating their case and determine if they want to proceed with the most serious charge, like murder, or perhaps just go forward on the involuntary manslaughter so they really have their options open. A status hearing was scheduled for January 12, 2026. At that hearing, prosecutors will decide whether to retry Maya Hernandez on the murder and manslaughter charges, negotiate a plea deal, or accept the child endangerment verdicts and move directly to sentencing. The maximum sentence for child endangerment under California law is 6 years in prison per count. Sentences are typically served concurrently rather than consecutively, meaning Hernandez might receive a maximum of 6 years, or potentially less with good behavior. A woman who left her baby to cook to death while she got cosmetic surgery might serve half a decade. Amillio Gutierrez will be dead forever. Social media exploded with outrage in the hours following the verdict announcement. She doesn't deserve the title of mother, one commenter wrote. How can anyone defend her? Demanded another. Her BBL was more important than her baby's life. This is what happens when vanity kills, and the system fails. 6 years maximum? That baby got a death sentence for having her as a mother. The case became a flashpoint for debates about parental responsibility, criminal justice, and the limits of the law. People who had never studied California's implied malice statute suddenly had strong opinions about it. People who had never lost a child weighed in on what punishment was appropriate. Over 1,010 children have died in hot cars nationwide since 1998, according to tracking by meteorologist Jan Null. Nearly 40 die every single year. In 2024, that number was 39, up from 29 the year before. In 2025, Amillio Gutierrez became one of at least 30 children to die this way. Every single one of those deaths was preventable. Critics argued that the verdict sends a dangerous message, that parents can leave their children to die through negligence and escape murder charges as long as they claim they didn't fully understand the consequences. Defenders of the jury's decision pointed to the legal requirements for second-degree murder. Implied malice means conscious disregard for human life. If Hernandez genuinely believed her children were safe in the car, however foolish that belief might have been, she didn't meet the legal standard for murder. Negligence, yes. Murder, no. But legal standards and moral standards are not always the same thing. Maya Hernandez is a certified nursing assistant who admitted she knew hot cars were dangerous to children. She was told via text message that she could bring her children inside the spa. She had a functional stroller in her trunk. She sat in a waiting room for over 2 hours chatting about holiday plans with strangers. She checked her Apple Watch 45 times without once walking outside to check on her babies. She lied to police about her watch being dead when surveillance footage proved otherwise. And when spa employee Isabel Carrion found her 15 minutes after she discovered the children in distress, Hernandez was sitting in her car holding her dying baby, not on the phone with 911, not performing CPR, not screaming for help. The jury couldn't agree that was murder. Maybe they were right about the law. Maybe the prosecution couldn't prove implied malice beyond a reasonable doubt. Maybe there's a meaningful distinction between a woman who knew leaving her children was dangerous and a woman who knew leaving her children would kill them. But try explaining that distinction to Katie Martinez, Emilio's grandmother. Try explaining it to the nurses who worked on his tiny body for 40 minutes trying to save him. Try explaining it to 2-year-old Mateo, who lost his brother and his mother and his father all at once, who sits in state custody somewhere wondering why his world fell apart. Rest in peace, Amillio Gutierrez. You learned to walk on Thursday. You died on Sunday. You deserved so much better than the mother you got. Was justice served? That's for you to decide. Let us know in the comments. If you haven't already, please subscribe to Crime Case Voices and hit that notification bell so you never miss a case. Your support helps us continue telling these stories. Stories of victims who deserve to be remembered, and systems that too often fail them. Until next time, stay safe out there. Stay aware.